What if the moon wasn't just a glowing beauty in the night sky, but the hidden choreographer of the ocean's rise and fall? Have you ever wondered how something so far away can make entire seas move? The answer lies in a powerful, yet invisible connection between the moon and Earth, and it's shaping our world every single day in ways you've likely never imagined. Welcome to tonight's episode of Science for Sleeping: Why the Ocean Dances to the Moon's Tune. Have you ever stood on a beach, feeling the sand shift beneath your feet as the tide washes in, and wondered why the ocean moves like this at all? It's captivating to watch, but surprisingly, not random in the slightest. These rising and falling waters are part of a perfect rhythm, one choreographed by forces you can't see at work. And the largest player in this cosmic orchestra, the moon. That much you might already know, but the way it controls this watery sway isn't quite as straightforward as you might think. Let's imagine Earth for a moment, blanketed by its vast oceans. Above it, the moon hangs in space, exerting a powerful force that connects it to our planet. The moon has gravity, and even though it's much smaller than Earth, it pulls on our oceans the same way Earth pulls everything else down to the ground. On the side of Earth that faces the moon, this gravitational pull is strongest, pulling water toward it and creating a large bulge of ocean water directly beneath the moon's position in the sky. This tug of war is what creates what we commonly refer to as a high tide. But here's where the moon plays a trick most people wouldn't expect. There's another high tide occurring at the exact same time, on the opposite side of the planet, farthest from the moon. This second bulge might feel like a gravitational paradox, almost as if gravity doesn't follow its own rules. But it's actually a result of how gravity stretches things unevenly. On the far side of Earth, the moon's gravitational pull isn't as strong as it is on the near side. Water on the far side of the Earth isn't being tugged as hard toward the moon, and in comparison, it's almost as if the solid Earth beneath the waters is slightly tugged away, leaving another bulge of water behind. So with two tidal bulges, one on the moon, facing side, and one directly opposite, we end up with two high tides every day as the Earth turns. Wherever these bulges align with your location on Earth, you find the ocean swelling up the beach. And when you're halfway between these bulges, that's when you get low tide. The ocean recedes, creating that striking difference between high and low water. Of course, the notion of a planet wrapped in these dynamic watery bulges adds a deeper layer of intrigue. The gravitational pull between the moon and the Earth doesn't just cause a simple, smooth pulling of water. It's more like a perpetual tug-of-war, with Earth's rotation pushing and stretching the oceans in constant motion. The end result is the tidal movement you can see from the shore twice a day, every day, no matter where you are in the world. And though the moon deserves the credit for being the star of this performance, its work doesn't stop here. The tides are full of surprises. As the moon's pull sets the oceans into motion, you'll find that the rhythm it creates is more complex than it first appears. These tides might seem predictable, but they're not perfectly uniform or steady in time. Have you ever noticed that high tide comes a little later every day? That's where things get even stranger. The mystery of the 50-minute delay. Have you ever noticed that high tide doesn't always show up at the same time each day? If you've spent a few days at the shore, it's something you might have picked up on, and it's genuinely puzzling at first. If the moon pulls the tides, why wouldn't they just follow a perfectly predictable schedule, rising and falling at the same time each day? Instead, they're always just a little late, about 50 minutes later every single day. It's an odd sort of delay, but to understand it, we need to look at how the moon and Earth move together. Here's where things get interesting. The moon doesn't stay in the exact same spot above our heads. It's always moving, orbiting around Earth. Meanwhile, Earth itself is spinning much faster, making one full rotation every 24 hours. So while the Earth is turning like a spinning top, the moon is creeping along its orbital path. This creates a bit of a mismatch because as the Earth spins, it has to catch up with where the moon has moved. Imagine you're running around a circular track, but up ahead is someone walking slowly. Each time you lap them, they've moved forward just a bit, so it takes you slightly longer to pass them each time. That's exactly what's happening between Earth's rotation and the moon's orbit. It's like a game of cosmic follow the leader, and the tides are caught right in the middle. Let's break it down even further. Think about that tidal bulge we talked about earlier, the one that aligns with the moon's position in the sky. It takes 24 hours for the Earth to complete one full rotation, which you might assume would bring everything perfectly back into place. But during that 24 hours, the moon isn't just sitting still, it's moved about 13 degrees along its orbit around Earth. That might not sound like much, but it means the Earth has to spin just a little longer to realign with the moon's new position. That extra time turns out to be about 50 minutes. It's why the tides don't perfectly fit into the rhythm of our clocks. They're following a rhythm set by the moon's motion, not just Earth's rotation. To make this easier to picture, imagine the hands of a clock. The Earth's rotation is like the minute hand, ticking along quickly. The moon's orbit, though, is more like the hour hand, slower, moving just a little each time the minute hand makes a full circle. If you're trying to get those two hands to line up perfectly, you'd notice that the minute hand has to go just a bit further each time to catch up. This lag is the same kind of phenomenon we see with the tides. It's not chaos or randomness. It's the result of two celestial bodies trying to sync up their very different speeds of movement. Now here's where this seemingly small delay starts to ripple out into our everyday lives. The 50-minute shift means that if high tide happens at 10 a.m. one day, the next day it'll show up closer to 10:50 a.m. And the day after that, it'll be around 11:40 a.m. Over time, these small movements add up, and depending on where you live, you might experience high tide at some very unusual hours. For coastal communities, this is more than just a fun fact. It's something that affects everything from fishing schedules to waterfront activities. Entire ecosystems have evolved to match the rhythm of tides, which themselves are following the moon's unhurried path. This delay is also why tidal charts, like the ones sailors and surfers use, are so important. You might think you can just keep an eye on the last day's tides and assume tomorrow will follow suit. But thanks to this extra 50-minute adjustment, you'd quickly find yourself off schedule. The connection between the moon's orbit and Earth's rotation means we need a bit of extra math to predict when the ocean will rise or fall. It's like we're constantly recalibrating to keep up with the moon's pace. And the fascinating thing is, this 50-minute drift is unyielding. No matter where you are on Earth, no matter the season, the tides will always lag behind like this, because the mechanics of the moon's orbit aren't changing on a human timescale. It's a small detail that threads through countless aspects of life on Earth, quietly affecting the way we interact with our planet.
Of course, we can't forget that this whole tidal system is influenced by more than just Earth and the moon. The sun also plays a role. It doesn't shape this daily delay, but it adds complexity to how the tides behave overall. That's why understanding the moon's orbit and Earth's rotation is only part of the story. When the sun's immense gravitational pull joins the mix, it introduces a new layer to the tidal dance. Depending on how the sun, moon, and Earth align, we get dramatic tidal changes or smaller, subtler ones. So while the oceans seem to follow this serene, steady rhythm controlled mostly by the moon, in reality, there's much more being juggled behind the scenes. The 50-minute gap might seem like a quirky detail about the tides, but it's actually a clue, a small window into the intricate gravitational ballet that our planet performs every day. And it raises an even bigger question. How do the sun and moon work together to shape the extremes of this natural phenomenon? Their combined effects create something even more awe-inspiring, a dynamic interplay that goes beyond simple tides. When the sun joins the dance. While the moon undeniably leads the way when it comes to Earth's tides, there's another celestial player quietly influencing the rhythm of the ocean: the sun. Now, the sun is massive, over 27 million times larger than the moon by volume. radiating incredible forces out into space. And yet, when it comes to tides, the sun's gravitational pull actually plays a supporting role. Its hold over Earth's oceans is only about half as strong as the moon's, thanks to the immense distance separating us from our nearest star. But despite being the second strongest force in this dance, the sun's influence is far from minor. Together, the sun and moon create some of the most dramatic tidal events you'll ever see. To fully understand the sun's part in this, we need to focus on how it aligns with the moon and Earth. Sometimes, these three bodies line up in a perfect row, a formation known as syzygy. This alignment occurs during the full moon and new moon phases, and it's when the sun and moon's gravitational forces combine. Picture the Earth caught between two cosmic giants pulling in the same direction. During these moments, their combined forces stretch the oceans even more, creating what's called a spring tide. Now don't let the name mislead you. Spring here doesn't have anything to do with the season. It comes from the Old English word springen, meaning to leap. It's an apt description of what happens as the oceans seem to nearly leap forward. Spring tides bring unusually high tides and strikingly low tides, giving the water a noticeably more dramatic range than what you'd see on an average day. But the story doesn't always play out this way. Halfway between these syzygy phases, the sun and moon position themselves at right angles relative to Earth. Imagine them forming an L shape in space. This happens during the first and third quarter moon phases and gives rise to what we call neap tides. In this arrangement, the gravitational pull of the sun and moon cancels out slightly. The water is being tugged in two separate directions, and the result is a gentler tidal range. High tides are lower than usual, and low tides aren't as low. A subtler, quieter motion, compared to the energetic extremes of spring tides. It's almost as if the ocean is resting, its usual drama toned down by the conflicting pulls. What's fascinating is how regular and predictable this cycle is. It repeats roughly every 29.5 days, matching the moon's orbit around Earth. Long before modern science explained the reasons behind it, people living near the coast depended on this rhythm. Fishermen, for instance, would plan trips around spring tides when the water was high enough to navigate shallow harbors or access certain fishing grounds. A spring tide could mean the difference between a safe passage and running aground. Meanwhile, neap tides, with their calmer waters, might make ideal conditions for tasks like repairing fishing nets or building docks. Although the sun's gravitational pull is only about 30 to 40% as strong as the moon's when it comes to generating tides, its role is still profound because of how these forces amplify or cancel each other out. During spring tides, you might find yourself at a rocky coastline, watching the water rush higher than usual, flooding spots that are normally bone dry. Conversely, neap tides might leave tidal pools clinging to the edges of an ocean that seems in no hurry to return. This interplay helps shape not just the movement of water, but the ecosystems that depend on it. So why don't we notice the sun's tidal force as much on its own? A big part of the answer lies in the simplicity of the gravitational math. Because the sun is so far away, its pull on Earth's oceans spreads out more evenly than the moon's. It doesn't cause those same dramatic bulges on either side of the planet that the moon does. It mostly adds or subtracts from what's already happening. Think of it like adjusting the volume on a song you know well. If the moon is the melody, then the sun is the mixer, turning up or down the intensity of the tides, depending on its alignment. Of course, this collaboration between the sun and the moon isn't always gentle. In certain parts of the world, their combined forces can create astonishingly high tides. During a spring tide, areas with the right coastal conditions, like narrow bays or funnel-shaped inlets,
can witness water levels rise far beyond their usual limits. These extreme tides can flood low-lying areas, wash away sand dunes, or even cause temporary changes to the landscape. It's a reminder of the raw power at work in this interaction. The sun and moon aren't just pulling water, they're shaping coastlines and altering human history in the process. What makes all of this even more fascinating is that the sun's influence isn't static. The intensity of its gravitational pull slightly fluctuates throughout the year, as Earth's orbit takes it closer or farther from the sun. When Earth is closest to the sun, during a point known as perihelion, the sun's tidal effects become a little stronger. When we're farther away, at aphelion, its effects weaken. While these changes are subtle, they add yet another layer of rhythm to an already intricate system. So far, we've been picturing tides as if the water were moving along a smooth, featureless Earth, but the reality is far more complicated. The shape of Earth itself plays a surprising role in how these forces play out. The sun and moon's combined gravitational pull might amplify the tides globally, but individual coastal areas often experience this influence in vastly different ways. Landforms like bays, cliffs, and underwater ridges distort and redirect tidal currents, sometimes canceling out the expected results altogether. And that's where the true beauty of our tidal system lies. It's not just a mathematical formula playing out across the globe. It's an intricate, almost chaotic interaction, shaped by gravitational forces, the contours of the Earth, and the dynamic movement of the oceans. This ever-changing system is a powerful reminder of how connected we are to forces far beyond our control. Without the sun, the tides would still exist, but they'd be gentler, less dramatic, lacking the push and pull that makes them such a continuous force of nature. But with the sun in the mix, we get something richer. Higher highs, lower lows, and an endlessly fascinating dance that's been unfolding unnoticed for millennia. The idea that such distant, untouchable celestial bodies can shape the world around us is both humbling and inspiring. It's a quiet kind of connection, the kind you can easily miss unless you take the time to notice the patterns. The interplay of the sun and moon reminds us of a greater network, a system where even a small gravitational tug from millions of miles away can ripple across oceans and touch the farthest shores.
And as captivating as this duet between the sun and moon is, the story isn't over. Beneath the surface, water isn't just moving in smooth, predictable patterns. Earth's very surface is playing a role, bending to these forces in unexpected ways. Its uneven shape, its geology. These are the unsung factors shaping why some parts of the world experience tidal extremes, while others barely see a change. And the more we look at the details, the more intricate this relationship becomes. It's not just about gravity, it's about geography, textures, and even the tiny inclinations of the Earth itself. The Earth's squishy, sloshing oceans. Did you know that the Earth isn't perfectly rigid or even completely round? At first glance, it might look like a calm and solid sphere from space. But the truth is, Earth is far more dynamic than it seems. Its surface is slightly squished at the poles and bulging at the equator, and its oceans are anything but still. These differences in shape and texture make the tidal dance between Earth, the Moon, and the Sun far more complex than you might imagine. And, while it's easy to think of the ocean as a smooth blanket of water draped across the planet, in reality, it behaves quite differently. More like a giant, squishy, sloshing mass that responds to the gravitational forces pulling at it from above. Here's where the Moon plays its most fascinating trick. Its gravitational pull stretches Earth's oceans, but not in a way that's even or symmetrical. Gravity isn't simply tugging the entire planet like a rope. Instead, it pulls most strongly on the part of the Earth closest to it. That means the water on the side of Earth facing the Moon rushes toward it, creating a noticeable bulge of ocean water. Meanwhile, the solid Earth itself,
the land beneath our feet, is also being tugged ever so slightly in the moon's direction. This subtle shift isn't something we feel in everyday life, but the entire planet's mass is deformed by just a few centimeters. Think about that for a second. Even the solid ground beneath us is bending under the moon's invisible grip. Nothing on Earth is truly still. The gravitational pull on the far side of Earth, the side opposite the moon, is weaker by comparison. And this is where things get interesting. The oceans there don't experience the same force pulling them toward the moon. Instead, they lag behind as the solid Earth is drawn slightly toward the moon, effectively leaving another bulge of water on the far side of the planet. It's not because the moon is physically tugging at that distant water. It's more like the solid Earth is being pulled out from under it. The result? A second tidal bulge that mirrors the one on the moon-facing side of the Earth. If you think about it, these bulges are like a quiet reminder that gravity isn't just one simple force. It's a constant push and pull. But here's where the idea of a squishy Earth becomes even more apparent.
Earth's oceans don't move as one smooth, synchronized wave. They slosh and shift as the planet rotates, creating complex tidal patterns that vary depending on location. Imagine shaking a bowl of water. You'd see ripples and waves form, each responding to the motion of your hand. On Earth, it's the moon's gravity that stirs the ocean, but the effects don't look the same everywhere. In some places, the timing and size of the tide are dramatic, while in others, it's surprisingly subdued. The difference comes down to the way Earth's uneven surface interacts with these forces.
Let's take it a step further. The movement of the tides isn't just about the water itself shifting around. The ground underneath it is also part of the equation. That small deformation of the Earth's mass I mentioned earlier creates a phenomenon known as earth tides. Essentially, tides don't only exist in the ocean, they exist in the land, too. The solid Earth rises and falls as tidal forces stretch the entire planet. Though these shifts are much smaller, about a few centimeters at most, you wouldn't notice it happening under your feet. But it's there, a steady rhythm that reminds us how interconnected everything on Earth truly is.
Of course, these tidal forces play out very differently depending on where you are. Coastlines, underwater ridges, and even the shape of the sea floor have a huge influence on what you experience. The moon's gravitational pull doesn't just act on the surface of the water, it interacts with the physical features of our planet, amplifying or dampening the effects in certain areas. Picture a wide open ocean stretching for miles. With nothing to block its movement, the tidal bulges flow freely across the surface. Now compare that to a narrow bay or a coastline surrounded by steep cliffs. The water in these confined spaces doesn't have enough room to flow smoothly, so it builds up, creating higher tides. It's no wonder that one place might see dramatic tidal swings, while another just a few hundred miles away barely notices a ripple.
Take the dynamic sloshing of Earth's oceans, for example. In the middle of the open Pacific, where the ocean has enormous space to spread out, tides are more subtle, rolling gently across vast distances. But in places like the Bay of Fundy in Canada, where the shape of the coastline funnels water into a narrow opening, the tidal range can reach staggering heights, over 16 meters in some spots. The difference in tidal impact is as much about the ocean's interaction with the physical Earth as it is about the moon's pull. It's a collaboration between celestial mechanics and geography, with each factor shaping the final result.
But it's not just geography that influences the tides. The rotation of the Earth itself adds another layer of complexity. As the planet spins, its oceans are constantly being dragged along, but they don't move in perfect harmony with the tidal bulges. Instead, the water lags slightly behind. You can think of it as a delay caused by the inertia of the water, the tendency of the oceans to resist sudden changes in motion. This lag means the highest point of the tide
doesn't occur exactly where the moon is overhead, but instead trails just behind it. It's as if Earth's oceans are always trying to catch up with the moon's pull, but never quite succeeding. All of this paints a picture of a planet that is far from static. Everything, from the oceans to the land itself, is in constant motion, responding to invisible forces that stretch, tug, and deform it over time. Even the simplest idea of a high tide, a place where the water rises and falls twice a day, turns out to mask an extraordinary level of complexity. Beneath the surface, these movements are anything but uniform. They shift in response to the moon's position, Earth's rotation, the shape of the coastline, and dozens of other factors that interact in ways we're only beginning to understand. And yet, for all of this complexity, the tides also reveal something beautifully simple. They show us how deeply connected Earth is to the moon, how even the smallest gravitational tug from 384,400 kilometers away can ripple through the very fabric of our planet. It's a gentle, persistent reminder that nothing on Earth exists in isolation. The water we see rushing across the beach or filling a tidal pool is part of a much bigger story, shaped by forces we take for granted most of the time. This uneven pull of the moon on Earth doesn't just explain why we get dramatic tides in some places, and barely any in others. It also highlights the constant interplay between the forces of nature and the unique geography of our planet. It's not just about how much water the moon can shift. It's about where that water goes and what's in its way. The next time you see the ocean rising, or feel the steady ebb and flow of a harbor, think about what's really happening beneath the surface. It's a global system of motion, a symphony conducted by the moon, but shaped note by note by the Earth itself. And as we look closer, there's even more to uncover about how these forces interact. Because if the oceans are squishy, constantly moving in response to gravity, imagine what happens when the land gets in the way. It's not just open water that determines the size of the tides. It's the cliffs, the trenches, and the hidden landscapes beneath the waves that turn this gravitational pull into a truly global and locally unique phenomenon.
Why some places have giant tides and others don't. Not all tides are created equal. In some places, the ocean swells dramatically, rising and falling by meters in a matter of hours, while in others, the change is so gentle you'd almost miss it if you weren't paying close attention. Take the Bay of Fundy, for example, tucked between the Canadian provinces of Nova Scotia and New Brunswick. This spot is famous for having the largest tidal ranges on Earth, where the water can rise and fall over 16 meters, or about 50 feet, every single day. It's a stunningly dramatic display, yet just a short journey away, in places like the Mediterranean Sea, tides barely ripple, shifting by only a few centimeters. So why such a stark difference? The answer lies not in the moon's pull, but in the shape of the Earth's surface, the geography of the land and oceans themselves. Let's start with the Bay of Fundy, as it's the perfect example of what happens when geography amplifies the natural motion of the tides. The bay is shaped like a funnel, wide at its opening and narrowing as it stretches inland. When the incoming tide rushes into this narrowing space, the water has nowhere else to go but up. The timing here is key. The bay's natural shape and depth synchronize perfectly with the flow of the tide, a phenomenon known as tidal resonance. Think of it like pushing a child on a swing. You have to time your pushes just right to keep the motion growing higher and higher. In the same way, the natural rhythm of the Bay of Fundy amplifies the tidal forces, piling water higher with each cycle. At low tide, entire portions of the seafloor are exposed, allowing visitors to walk on land that will soon be submerged under meters of seawater. Hours later, those same rocky outcrops and coastal cliffs are hidden by an ocean that has come roaring back, and the scenery is completely transformed.
It's a striking reminder of just how powerful and dynamic tidal forces can be when geography lends them a boost. Now, contrast that to the Mediterranean Sea. This nearly enclosed body of water is connected to the larger Atlantic Ocean by the narrow Strait of Gibraltar, a passage so small that it significantly restricts the movement of water in and out. Without a wide opening for tidal energy to flow through, the Mediterranean doesn't experience the same dramatic tidal forces. Instead, its waters remain calm, with only modest shifts in sea level. In most places along its coastline, the tides are practically imperceptible. It's a fascinating contrast. Despite being under the exact same gravitational influences of the moon and sun, the shape and openness of the sea completely change how the tides behave. It's like comparing a wide, flowing river to a still, placid pond. The natural features of a coastline also play a huge role in shaping how tides manifest. Narrow bays, steep coasts, and underwater ridges can all magnify the height of a tide by trapping water or redirecting its flow. This is why some areas like estuaries or fjords are known for their exaggerated tidal ranges. The Severn Estuary in the United Kingdom is an excellent example. Here, the incoming tide creates a phenomenon known as the Severn bore, a tidal wave that travels up the river against the current. Unlike the gradual rise and fall of the ocean's surface in most places, the Severn bore forms a single, long wave stretching for miles as it surges inland. It's a thrilling sight, and for adventurous surfers and kayakers, it's an irresistible opportunity to ride a natural, tidal roller coaster. The bore shows yet another way tides, amplified by geography, can create unique and even extreme effects in certain regions. But these tidal extremes aren't just about dramatic visuals, they're deeply connected to life on Earth. The places where tides are most intense often host some of the planet's most vibrant ecosystems. The tidal range dictates which areas are exposed to air or submerged underwater, creating specialized habitats that are constantly in flux. In areas with extreme tides like the Bay of Fundy, you'll find thriving intertidal zones where plants and animals have adapted to this ever-changing landscape. Species like barnacles, sea stars, and crabs time their daily routines with the tide, and large flocks of migratory birds depend on exposed mudflats to feed on tiny crustaceans during low tide. Even the smallest creatures are attuned to the rhythm of these tidal swells, forming a web of life that dances to the moon and sun's gravitational pull. On the other hand, places with minimal tides like the Mediterranean offer a different sort of stability. Without large tidal swings to shape the coastline, the ecosystems here look and function differently. Coral reefs, rocky shorelines, and seagrass meadows thrive in this more predictable environment. While the tides may not define life in the same way as they do in areas with extreme tidal ranges, the ocean's stillness creates its own unique opportunities for marine life to flourish. The effect of tidal forces is not limited to nature, though. Humans have adapted to these patterns too, and in areas with extreme tides, entire ways of life revolve around them. Coastal communities build their infrastructure, fishing techniques, and daily routines around the timing of the tides, relying on their predictability to navigate the waters safely. In the Bay of Fundy, for example, fishermen use the shifting tides to access valuable shellfish beds that would otherwise lie submerged, while in places like the Severn Estuary, industries such as tidal energy harness the power of these massive water movements.
Still, the question remains. Why are these differences so impactful? It all comes down to how the energy from the moon and sun is distributed across the Earth's surface. In areas where water has room to move freely, like vast open oceans, tides flow gently, spreading their energy over a wide area. But in places where water is confined or funneled, whether it's a bay, a river, or a narrow sea, this energy becomes compressed. The water has less room to go outward, so it's forced upward instead. This concentration of tidal energy can cause dramatic changes, both in the height of the tides and in how quickly they rise and fall. One last fascinating factor in the story of tides is the role of underwater topography, the hidden mountains, valleys, and trenches lurking beneath the ocean's surface.
These features shape the flow of water just as much as the visible coastline does. Imagine a tidal wave rolling across the ocean floor. As it encounters an underwater ridge, it slows down and rises higher, much like ocean waves cresting before they break on shore. These invisible landscapes are constantly shaping the tides, even though we rarely see them in action. This interplay of gravity, geography, and water is why some places experience jaw-dropping tidal ranges, while others seem to barely notice the moon's pull. It's not just a phenomenon of celestial mechanics. It's a story written into the very shape and structure of our planet. From narrow bays that amplify tidal surges to quiet seas that resist them entirely, the diversity of Earth's landscapes creates a tidal system that is anything but uniform. And yet, all of these shifts and ripples boil down to a single, simple connection. No matter where you are, whether it's a gentle Mediterranean harbor or the thunderous Bay of Fundy, every tidal movement is a response to the gravitational pull of celestial neighbors thousands or millions of miles away. The same forces that sculpt gentle ripples in one place create towering waves in another, showing us that tides aren't just about moving water. They're about the deep and constant relationship between our world and the wider universe. This unequal distribution of tidal energy has shaped coastlines, ecosystems, and human history in ways we are only beginning to fully understand. And if you look closely, tides aren't just a science lesson. They're a reminder of how even the tiniest nudge from a distant body, far out in space, can ripple through an entire planet. But there's another side to this story. Tides don't just shape landscapes or dictate the behavior of oceans. They've also shaped life itself. Life on the edge. The intertidal zone. Between the land and the sea lies a space that isn't entirely one or the other. It's a place dictated by the tides, constantly shifting back and forth between wet and dry as the water rises and falls twice a day. This is the intertidal zone, where the rules of survival are very different from anywhere else on Earth. At high tide, it becomes part of the ocean, submerged and alive with underwater activity. But as the water retreats during low tide, it transforms into an exposed landscape, subject to the heat of the sun, the pull of the wind, and the curious gaze of land-dwelling predators. For the creatures that live here, it's a world of constant change, and they're uniquely adapted to thrive within this extreme rhythm. Take the sea star, for example. It might look like a slow, fragile creature, but it's perfectly built for life in the intertidal zone. When the tide is in, sea stars move across the rocks, their tube-like feet gripping surfaces as they hunt for mussels and clams. These meals aren't easy to open, but sea stars have a methodical way of dealing with them, a hydraulic-powered grip that patiently pulls apart the shells. Feeding underwater is their active phase, but as the tide pulls back, the sea star's world shifts. Exposed to the open air, it clings to a damp rock, conserving moisture and waiting for the ocean to return. This cycle of action and patience is entirely dictated by the tides, and sea stars have mastered it. Then there's the periwinkle snail, a much smaller but equally resourceful resident of this zone. At low tide, you'll often find them clustered tightly to rocks, almost motionless. They do this for good reason. Being exposed to the air puts them at risk of drying out, a constant threat in this environment. But when the water comes back, it's an entirely different story. As the rocks are once again submerged, the snails come alive, gliding slowly over the surfaces to graze on algae. They've learned to make the most of their time underwater, while ensuring they stay safe and hydrated during the dry hours. It's a quiet, yet essential rhythm that keeps them going in such an unpredictable space. Not all intertidal creatures cling to rocks or hide during low tide. Some, Like the grunion fish, use the tides for one of the most important tasks of all: reproduction. Native to the coasts of California and Mexico, grunion have developed an extraordinary strategy. During a spring tide, when the water reaches farthest up the shoreline, thousands of grunion take to the beach at night. They wiggle up onto the damp sand to lay their eggs above the usual reach of the ocean. Then, they retreat back into the waves, leaving the eggs safely tucked away in the sand. For 2 weeks, the eggs remain hidden, unaffected by the typical rise and fall of the tides. But when the next spring tide comes, the high water triggers the eggs to hatch, and newly emerged grunion are swept back into the ocean. It's a cycle so finely tuned to the tides that it seems almost too perfect to be real. And it's not just fish that depend on this cycle. Horseshoe crabs, ancient creatures that have remained relatively unchanged for millions of years, also time their lives with the tides. Every year, they gather on beaches during the heightened tides of May and June to spawn. With the new or full moon pulling the tides to their extremes, the crabs come ashore en masse. Females dig into the sand to deposit their eggs, while males compete to fertilize them. These eggs don't just represent the next generation of horseshoe crabs, they're also crucial to dozens of other species. Migratory birds, like the red knot, time their long journeys to coincide with this annual event, flocking to the beaches to feast on the nutrient-rich eggs. For the crabs, the tides provide the perfect conditions for reproduction, but for the birds, they signal a rare and vital opportunity to refuel for the next leg of their migration. Beyond individual creatures, the intertidal zone plays a larger role in sustaining entire ecosystems. In estuaries and salt marshes, places where fresh water meets the ocean, the tides act as nature's conveyor belt. As the water flows in and out, it carries nutrients, plankton, and organic material across the landscape. These constant deliveries of resources make these areas some of the most productive ecosystems on Earth. They're like all-you-can-eat buffets for marine and bird life. Salt marsh grasses, which thrive here despite the salty conditions, trap sediments, further enriching the habitat and stabilizing coastlines. The tides, in this sense, don't simply provide life. They help protect it, creating a balance between the land and the sea. If you were to walk along a rocky tidal pool at low tide, you'd see this unique world up close. Tiny crabs scurry along the edges, barnacles cling tightly to surfaces, and limpets form perfect seals against the rocks to conserve moisture. Some creatures, like sea anemones, look almost lifeless as they retreat into themselves, waiting for the water's return to unfurl and feed. Each one has developed its own way of surviving this dual environment. When the tide is out, the creatures must defend against drying out, overheating, or becoming an easy snack for predators. When the tide is in, they enter a completely different mode, feeding, reproducing, and living their underwater lives. It's an ecosystem in constant motion, shaped by forces beyond its control. This delicate balance between water and land has been equally significant for humans. For thousands of years, people have relied on the intertidal zone, not just for food, but for life itself. Indigenous communities along many coasts carefully observed the tides, using them to predict when fish, shellfish, and other resources would be available. Many cultures built tide pools and traps to collect fish as the water receded, taking advantage of the ocean's natural rhythms. Today, coastal communities around the world still benefit from the rich bounty of the intertidal zone, harvesting everything from clams to seaweed. As we've seen, the intertidal zone isn't a passive landscape. It's alive, vibrant, and in constant conversation with the tides. The daily rise and fall of the ocean create a world that is half land, half sea, and full of life. Each creature, from the smallest barnacle to the largest horse crab, has evolved to meet the challenges of this ever-changing environment. Without the tides, none of this would exist. Not the ecosystems shaped by them, nor the ways of life enriched by their rhythms. The intertidal zone is proof that the tides aren't just a physical phenomenon, they're a force that sustains life, linking the creatures of the shore to the wider cycles of the moon, the sun, and the earth. Most astonishingly, this zone isn't just a site of survival, but also of collaboration. Organisms, tides, and even humans interact here in a way that highlights just how intricately connected everything is. What appears to be a place of harsh extremes is, in fact, a thriving ecosystem nourished by the very forces that make it challenging. Layers of sand, water, and wind all meet here, constantly reshaping the landscape and the creatures that call it home. But the story doesn't end with nature. If the tides are capable of shaping ecosystems and entire ways of life, imagine what happens when humans try to harness this immense power. For centuries, tidal forces have been a source of inspiration and utility, from early tidal mills to modern tidal energy projects. The intertidal zone may be where the effects of the tides are most dramatic, but they're only part of a much larger energy system, the same one that's now being harvested to power our world. And as we turn to renewable energy, the intersection of science, nature, and human ingenuity shows us yet another way the tides continue to shape life on Earth. The moon's slow goodbye. The moon has been Earth's closest companion for billions of years, a steady presence in the night sky. But what if I told you that, little by little, it's slowly drifting farther away? Every year, the moon moves about 3.8 centimeters farther into space, roughly the same speed as fingernails grow. It's such a small distance that we'd never notice it in our lifetimes, but it's been happening for an astonishingly long time, and it's far from meaningless. This gentle retreat is affecting more than just how we see the moon. It's quietly reshaping the intricate relationship between Earth and its tides. At the heart of this slow separation is a process called tidal friction. As the Earth spins, it pulls the ocean's tidal bulges slightly out of alignment with the moon. Instead of being directly under the moon or on its opposite side, they're just a little ahead, like a water-filled lagging shadow. This misalignment creates a bit of resistance, like dragging your hand through water, and that resistance is what we call tidal friction. The energy lost in this constant subtle tug does two important things. First, it slows down the Earth's rotation just a tiny bit, lengthening our days over millions of years. Second, it transfers energy to the moon, giving it a small boost in its orbit. That's what's causing the moon to incrementally drift farther away. You can think of it as the moon stealing some of Earth's rotational energy. It's a cosmic exchange. Earth spins a little slower, and the moon gains that energy to escape slightly farther from us. Imagine spinning a top. When the top first starts, it's spinning fast and upright. But over time, friction with the surface slows it down until it wobbles and eventually stops. Earth's wobble will never be that dramatic. It's far too vast and massive, but the principle is the same. Like the spinning top, Earth is gradually losing its speed. What's left is time itself stretching out. Hundreds of millions of years ago, a day on Earth was only around 22 hours long. Today, it's 24 hours as we know it. And millions of years from now, our days might stretch to 26 or 28 hours. This slowing, however, doesn't just affect the length of the day. It's bound up with the tides as well. As the moon drifts farther away, its gravitational influence on Earth weakens. It's like moving a magnet farther from a paperclip. The farther the magnet gets, the smaller the effect. For Earth, this means that the tidal bulges created by the moon are gradually shrinking over time. In the future, the dramatic rise and fall of the tides we see today will become softer, less pronounced. What we experience now, the rushing in of high tide, the pulling back of low tide, will seem exaggerated compared to the far gentler rhythms future Earth will know. It's a strange thought. the moon slowly leaving us, taking with it the tides we've come to accept as natural and unchanging. But this story isn't about any immediate drama. The moon's retreat is incremental, measured in millimeters and centimeters over thousands of years. Still, when you stretch this movement out over billions of years, the changes become enormous. If we could leap forward in time, millions of years from now, Earth's tides might resemble the gentle laps of a pond more than the great crashing waves we associate with places like the Bay of Fundy today. But there's an even bigger idea hiding in all this. The moon's gradual escape is part of a much longer story, a kind of cosmic evolution that has shaped our planet's history. Billions of years ago, shortly after Earth and the moon formed, the two were much closer together. Back then, the moon loomed large in the sky, appearing several times its current size. The tides were immense, periodically flooding massive areas of coastline. This was a time when days were far shorter, possibly just 5 or 6 hours long, and the tides cycled in and out much faster than they do today. The distance between the Earth and moon, the length of a day, and the size of the tides have all been changing ever since, locked together in this slow but persistent process. Interestingly, the moon's retreat isn't just a geological curiosity. It's understood down to extraordinary precision using modern science. Scientists have measured its drift using a fascinating piece of technology: retroreflectors left on the moon's surface by the Apollo missions. These devices, which act like mirrors, allow scientists to bounce laser beams off of them and measure the time it takes for the light to return to Earth. This method has revealed that the moon is indeed moving away at a steady rate of about 3.8 centimeters every year. It's an astonishing reminder that even seemingly eternal relationships, like the one between Earth and the moon, are subject to change. But what happens if we look even further ahead? As the moon continues to drift, its gravitational pull will weaken to the point where it no longer has the same effect on Earth's oceans. The tides won't disappear entirely. After all, the sun also contributes to them, but they'll be smaller and less dynamic. Coastal areas that currently thrive because of strong tidal movements, such as salt marshes or intertidal zones, might lose the very forces that sustain their ecosystems. That's perhaps one of the most sobering things about this process. The changes, though gradual, will alter the landscapes and habitats that are shaped by the tides today. And what about Earth's rotation? Just as the moon's gravity stretches the oceans, slowing the planet's spin, it's also extending the length of our days. This might not sound like an urgent matter. After all, a few extra milliseconds added to a day doesn't exactly disrupt anyone's schedule. But over billions of years, it changes the pace of life on Earth. If you've ever wished for more time in the day, the universe is slowly granting your wish. The trade-off, of course, is that these longer days come at the cost of a more distant moon and calmer tides. In light of all this, it's fascinating to think about how interconnected everything is. The moon's slow departure isn't just about the tides or lengthening days. At its core, it's about the transfer of energy on a cosmic scale, subtle but unrelenting. It's a story of balance, where every action has a consequence and nothing stands still forever. Even something as steady and reliable as the tides is part of this vast web of motion, shaped by forces playing out across billions of years. What's fascinating is that while this process feels distant, practically invisible during the span of one human lifetime, it's a reminder of the great, slow forces acting on our planet all the time. The moon didn't just shape Earth's tides. Early in our planet's history, it helped stabilize Earth's tilt, which influences our climate and seasons. And as it continues to move away, those effects will gradually shift, though at a pace far too slow for us to notice without advanced tools and calculations. Despite the moon's retreat, it still exerts one of the strongest gravitational influences on Earth. It won't be leaving us entirely anytime soon. It's more like a slow, gradual goodbye stretching out over eons. By the time the moon becomes truly distant, Earth will have undergone transformations we can hardly imagine. But for now, the tides remain a steady, daily reminder of this connection. Every wave that laps at the shore, every sudden rush of water into a harbor, is powered by this quiet, invisible pull, one that has shaped the Earth for billions of years and will continue to shape it for billions more, albeit in subtler ways. And yet, this changing relationship between Earth and the moon isn't just a story of loss. Humans have already learned to work with the tides, not just to live near them, but to harness their power. While the moon slowly drifts into the distance, the energy of the tides remains accessible, a reminder that even as systems evolve and change, they leave behind opportunities for life to adapt and, in some cases, thrive. Tidal energy, harnessing the moon's power. Imagine for a moment that the pull of the moon, the same gravitational force that raises tides all over the planet, could one day power your home. It's not as far-fetched as it sounds. Tidal energy, a clean and incredibly predictable renewable energy source, is already turning this idea into reality. Unlike solar power, which depends on clear skies, or wind power, which relies on steady gusts, tidal energy is reliable to an almost eerie degree. The moon's movements are as predictable as clockwork, and so are the tides it generates. That consistency makes tidal energy an appealing solution for a world that's increasingly looking for sustainable alternatives to fossil fuels. Across the globe, engineers and scientists are studying ways to harness the rhythmic push and pull of the tides to generate electricity. One of the most well-known examples is the Rance Tidal Power Station in Brittany, France, which has been in operation since 1966. This facility uses a method called a tidal barrage, essentially a dam that spans a tidal estuary. As the tide comes in, water flows through the barrage, spinning turbines that generate electricity. When the tide recedes, the process reverses, and energy is extracted as the water flows back out. It's a straightforward yet ingenious system, and the numbers back up its success. The Rance station generates enough electricity to power approximately 130,000 homes, proving that tidal energy is not just an experiment, but a viable, large-scale solution. Tidal barrages like the one at Rance represent one approach to tidal energy, but they're not the only way we're trying to tap into the moon's power. Tidal stream generators take a different route. These are essentially underwater wind turbines, placed in fast-moving tidal currents, where water flow can spin their blades. Unlike barrages, which require massive construction projects across estuaries, tidal stream generators can be installed in open waters without requiring significant changes to the environment. Picture them as silent, spinning giants standing beneath the waves, harvesting the kinetic energy of moving water. Some of the most promising projects are being deployed in places like the Pentland Firth in Scotland, where powerful tidal flows race between the mainland and nearby islands. Another method, tidal lagoons, adds yet one more option to the mix. Think of a tidal lagoon as a man-made pool along the coastline, separated from the open ocean by a barrier. As the tide rises, water flows into the lagoon through turbines, generating power. When the tide recedes, that same water flows back out, generating even more electricity. Unlike tidal barrages, tidal lagoons don't require a river estuary to operate, making them more adaptable to different geographic locations. The concept is still under development, but proposals for tidal lagoon projects in the UK have generated excitement because they promise to reduce environmental impact while offering significant energy returns. Despite these promising technologies, harnessing the moon's power isn't without its challenges. One of the biggest obstacles is the environment itself. Salt water is brutally corrosive, eating away at metals and weakening structures over time. Any equipment placed in the ocean has to be built not only to withstand strong currents and storms, but also to resist the constant assault of salt and marine organisms like barnacles, which attach themselves to anything they can. This makes construction and maintenance expensive, driving up the overall cost of tidal energy projects compared to other renewables like wind and solar. Geography presents another hurdle. Tidal energy isn't feasible everywhere. It requires specific conditions to work effectively. Locations need to have a large tidal range or fast-moving tidal currents to generate enough energy to justify the investment. For instance, narrow straits or deep estuaries, where water is naturally funneled and forced to flow more quickly, are ideal. But these conditions are relatively rare, limiting the number of places where tidal energy can realistically be implemented on a large scale. Then there's the issue of environmental impact. While tidal energy is often praised for being more predictable and less intrusive than other forms of renewable energy, it's not completely without consequences. Projects like tidal barrages can disrupt local ecosystems, altering water flow and affecting the plants and animals that depend on natural tidal cycles. Fish and marine mammals are particularly vulnerable, as turbines can pose a physical risk, and changes in water levels can disrupt their migratory patterns or breeding cycles. Even tidal lagoons, while less invasive than barrages, require significant coastal construction that can disrupt habitats. Balancing the need for clean energy with the health of marine ecosystems remains a challenge for tidal energy developers. Despite these obstacles, there's no denying the potential of tidal energy to play a significant role in a sustainable future. One of its greatest strengths is its predictability. Unlike solar panels, which can't generate power during a cloudy day or night, or wind turbines which go still when the air is calm, tidal energy follows the moon's rhythm. Its reliability means power grids can plan with confidence, incorporating it as a steady source of energy rather than a variable one. This consistency, combined with its renewable nature, makes tidal energy a particularly valuable tool in the fight against climate change. Globally, interest in tidal energy is growing. Projects are being developed from South Korea to the United Kingdom, each pushing the boundaries of what's possible. In South Korea, the Siwa Lake Tidal Power Station, the largest of its kind, has been a major success, providing renewable electricity to thousands of homes. Meanwhile, in Canada, the Bay of Fundy, famous for having the world's highest tides, is serving as a testbed for innovative tidal stream generator designs. These initiatives are not only advancing technology, but also helping to refine methods to minimize environmental impact and reduce costs. As these projects evolve, they're setting the stage for tidal energy to move from niche applications to a mainstream energy source. The story of tidal energy is one of perseverance. It's about taking one of the oldest, most predictable forces on Earth and finding ways to channel it into something modern and essential: clean, renewable energy. It's a reminder that even as the moon slowly drifts away, its gravitational pull continues to shape our world in profound ways. What was once simply the force behind the tides is now a source of hope, offering a way to power our lives while leaving a lighter footprint on the planet. In many ways, harnessing tidal energy feels like an extension of our relationship with the moon. For millennia, humans have looked up at the moon, marveling at its beauty, tracking its phases, and adapting to the cycles it creates on Earth. Now, as we face the challenges of a changing climate, we're learning to adapt once again, this time by working with the tides it creates. It's a quiet kind of partnership, one rooted not in the leaps of human ingenuity, but in patient, deliberate observation of the natural world. The moon's movements have always been there, steady and reliable. It took us centuries to realize just how much potential lies in that reliable pull. Looking forward, tidal energy offers possibilities that aren't just exciting, but necessary. As we continue to hunt for alternatives to fossil fuels, technologies like tidal energy remind us that we don't always have to invent something entirely new. Sometimes the answers are already there, built into systems that have existed for billions of years. The tides, driven by the moon's gravity, have been shaping our planet and sustaining life for as long as there has been an ocean to move. Now, as we work toward a more sustainable future, they may also sustain us in ways we're only beginning to understand. It's hard not to feel a sense of awe when you consider the moon's influence on our lives. It pulls the oceans, shapes coastal ecosystems, and now it helps provide electricity. And yet its work is so quiet and constant that we rarely pause to think about it. Harnessing the power of the tides is a way to turn that invisible force into something tangible, something that lights up our homes or powers our communities. It's a profound reminder that even a force as old and steady as the tides can offer solutions to modern problems. As we explore the potential of tidal energy, we're not just solving for today, we're creating systems that could serve us for centuries, as reliable as the moon itself. While the challenges are real, from high costs to environmental trade-offs, every advancement in technology gets us closer to a cleaner future. Somewhere in the gentle ebb and flow of the tides is an immense force, waiting to be fully realized. It's a force that ties us to the moon and reminds us of how deeply interconnected we are with the cosmos.